Evan Cade wasn't looking for trouble when he wandered into the Cosmic Agora, a sprawling marketplace in the orbiting megacity of Zephyrus Prime. It was supposed to be a routine stop, a chance to refuel his freighter, the Starweaver, and maybe snag some exotic snacks. The Agora, with its maze of stalls manned by merchants from every corner of the galaxy, was the perfect place to kill time. But then, Evan saw her. She was behind a stall displaying radiant artifacts. Her skin was an opalescent silver, shimmering faintly as if it absorbed and reflected the faint starlight filtering through the station's translucent dome. Waves of lavender hair framed her angular face, and her violet eyes sparkled like twin nebulae. Her attire, a flowing gown of layered iridescent threads, moved as though alive, emphasizing her graceful figure. "You stare as though you've never seen a Xantharian," she said, her voice a soft melody that tugged at something primal within him. Evan coughed, trying to recover. "Apologies. Didn't mean to gawk. Your, words caught my attention." Her lips quirked into a smirk. "Is that so, traveler?" she asked, brushing her hand across the crystalline counter, where shimmering objects pulsed faintly. "I am Ayla. Everything you see here is handcrafted by my people, imbued with the essence of our emotions." Evan leaned closer, curiosity overtaking his self-consciousness. The objects on the counter seemed alive, their faint luminescence shifting as he approached. "Impressive craftsmanship," he said. "What exactly do they do?" "Some heal. Others protect. A few," her voice dropped, taking on a teasing edge. "Bind souls." The way she said it made his heart stutter. But before he could respond, she added, "Come back tomorrow. I'll show you something special. A piece I've been saving." Evan nodded, caught in her gaze. "Tomorrow, then?" Her parting words lingered. "Don't keep me waiting, traveler. And we're something that shows you respect Xantharian traditions." The next evening, Evan returned, freshly showered and in a tailored jacket he usually reserved for rare diplomatic runs. He spotted Ayla immediately, but something was wrong. 3 burly Draxel traders loomed over her stall, their scaled bodies blocking the light. Their guttural growls echoed as one of them swiped an artifact off the counter, smashing it to the ground. "Your kind has no claim here, Xantharian," the largest of them snarled. Ayla stood her ground, but her eyes flashed with anger. "The Agora is neutral space. You have no right to harass me." Evan didn't hesitate. He stepped between Ayla and the Draxel leader, his voice calm but firm. "Back off. Now." The Draxel glared down at him. "This is none of your concern, human. That's where you're wrong." Evan rolled his shoulders, his posture radiating confidence. "You're interfering with my business." The Draxel lunged, but Evan was faster. His training kicked in. He dodged the massive claw swipe, driving his elbow into the Draxel's exposed throat. The alien wheezed, stumbling back. A swift kick to the second Draxel's knee dropped him, and a sharp jab to the third side had him collapsing in agony. Panting slightly, Evan turned to Ayla. "You okay?" She stared at him, her violet eyes wide. "You didn't need to do that," she said softly, her voice trembling. Not with fear, but something else. "They won't bother you again." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, her lips curled into a smile. "No, they won't. You've proven yourself. Remarkable." Ayla's workshop was unlike anything Evan had seen. Crystals grew from the walls, their hues shifting with an almost hypnotic rhythm. The air hummed with energy, and the objects displayed here pulsed with a vitality absent from her stall. "This place," he began, "is sacred to my people," Ayla finished, her voice reverent. "And you, Evan Cade, have earned the right to see it." She moved to a crystalline pedestal, where a glowing artifact rested. It was small, no larger than a fist, and seemed to shift between colors, reflecting the emotions in the room. "This," she said, lifting it carefully, "is a Xantharian bond vessel." Evan stepped closer, captivated. "What does it do?" "It creates a connection, eternal, unbreakable." She offered it to him, her hands trembling slightly. "Take it." He hesitated, sensing the gravity of the moment. "Are you sure?" Ayla's gaze softened. "Yes. I have waited for someone worthy, someone who acts with courage and honor. You've proven yourself, Evan. Her words stirred something deep within him. Slowly, he took the vessel. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, it flared to life, the colors swirling wildly. A warmth spread through his chest, and for a brief moment, he felt as though he could sense Ayla's very thoughts and emotions. She exhaled shakily. "It's done?" "What's done?" he asked, confused. Her smile was radiant, but there was a teasing glint in her eyes. "You've accepted the bond, traveler. In Xantharian tradition, that means you've accepted me." Realization dawned. "Wait, are you saying—" "Yes, Evan Cade." Ayla stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You've agreed to be my mate. Forever." Before he could form a coherent response, she pulled him into a kiss that left no room for doubt. Evan was still trying to process what had just happened when Ayla pulled away, her violet eyes alight with something far deeper than mere mischief. Her fingers lingered on his chest, her touch soft and almost reverent, as if she were absorbing his every breath. I didn't mean to," he stammered, but she placed a delicate finger to his lips, silencing him. "Do not apologize, Evan Cade," she murmured, her voice low and rich with something ancient. "You have accepted my gift, and with it you have accepted me." Her smile was gentle, but there was a depth to it that made his heart race in an unfamiliar way. He was still trying to wrap his mind around the idea of bonding, of marriage in the Xantharian sense. But everything around him, the soft glow of the crystals, the warmth of her touch, made it feel more like destiny than a choice. He had felt the vessel pulse when he accepted it, felt the bond solidify. That warmth in his chest hadn't gone away. It only deepened. "I didn't know. I didn't understand," he said, his voice tinged with confusion, but also a growing realization. "What happens now? I thought this was just a gift." "It is," she replied, her gaze steady. "But in our culture, gifts such as these carry great meaning. When the bond vessel is accepted, it is as if you've sealed an unspoken promise. Our lives are now intertwined, Evan. You are my chosen partner." Evan stared at her, unsure whether to be overwhelmed, honored, or terrified. He had come here for a routine stop on a cargo run, never expecting his life to be turned upside down. But there was something undeniable about the pull he felt toward Ayla, a connection that went deeper than any rational explanation. "So, that's it then?" he asked, half expecting her to laugh, but she didn't. Instead, her expression softened, and she moved closer. "It's not just a promise. It's a journey," she said, reaching out to brush his cheek with the back of her hand. "I have lived among the stars for many cycles, but never before has a human accepted the bond willingly. It is a rare thing, and it binds us in ways beyond the physical. You will feel me, even when we are apart, and I will feel you." Evan swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. This wasn't just a contract or a fleeting connection. It was a life-altering change. "And what if I don't know how to live up to it?" he asked quietly, his voice rough with the weight of uncertainty. "You already are," Ayla said simply. "You have proven your strength, your courage, and your heart. It is all I ever needed." She reached up to his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. And for the first time since they had met, Evan saw the vulnerability beneath her confident demeanor. There was a quiet sincerity in her eyes, a depth of emotion that he couldn't begin to comprehend but knew, instinctively, was real. "But I don't know your world, Ayla," he said, almost pleading. "I don't know how to live here, how to be the kind of partner you deserve." She smiled again, and this time it was full of understanding. "We will learn together. The bond will guide us." Before he could respond, she took his hand and led him through the winding corridors of her private workshop. They passed delicate sculptures that seemed to hum with their own energy, their surfaces shimmering in the dim light of the room. "This place," Evan began, but Ayla silenced him with a look, guiding him toward a large, circular chamber at the back of the workshop. The walls were lined with more of the strange, luminous crystals, and in the center stood a raised platform surrounded by intricate patterns of light. "I want to show you something," she said softly, releasing his hand and stepping onto the platform. She gestured for him to follow. It is part of our tradition. You will see the truth of the bond we've just made." Evan hesitated, but curiosity, more than any lingering doubts, pulled him toward her. He stepped onto the platform beside her, feeling the subtle shift in the air around them as the crystals hummed to life. Suddenly, the room around them transformed. The soft glow of the crystals intensified, and vivid, dreamlike images began to swirl in the air, filling the space with flashes of light and color. Evan's breath caught in his throat as the images coalesced. He saw glimpses of distant stars, alien landscapes filled with strange plants and creatures. But it wasn't just a visual display. It was as though the images were tied to emotions, to memories, his memories and Ayla's. He saw himself, younger and more carefree, walking through bustling spaceports, hauling cargo, living life as a lone traveler. He saw his longing for something more, something deeper. He saw the moments when he had wished for connection, for meaning beyond the endless stars. And then he saw Ayla. Her face, at first, was a distant memory, a fleeting vision in his subconscious. But as the images grew more vivid, he saw her clearly, waiting, watching, and eventually calling to him across the cosmos. The bond that had brought him here wasn't just a random twist of fate. It had always been there, drawing him closer, even when he didn't know it. Ayla's voice broke through the swirling images, soft and steady. "The bond reveals all things, Evan. It has always been our way to see the threads that tie us together, even when we cannot see them ourselves." He looked at her, or written across his face. "This is real," he whispered. "All of this?" Ayla nodded, her eyes shining with a mix of joy and something else, something ancient. "You are mine, as I am yours. This is just the beginning." Evan's heart raced, but instead of fear, it was something else, a sense of belonging, a deep certainty. He had never been one for destiny, but standing here, with Ayla beside him, he felt as though he had finally found the place he was always meant to be. "Where do we go from here?" he asked, his voice steady now, as he took her hand once more. "Wherever the bond leads us," Ayla replied, her smile both playful and profound. "But I think we have much to explore together," Evan cayed, "much to discover." And as the light from the crystals bathed them in its ethereal glow, Evan knew that no matter where they went, no matter what the future held, this was the beginning of something far greater than anything he could have ever imagined. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Evan had expected to feel the bond between him and Ayla as a simple tether, a subtle connection that linked their emotions and senses. But as he settled into the rhythms of her world, he realized it was so much more. The bond coursed through him, wrapping around his thoughts and emotions in a way that felt both exhilarating and disorienting. He was beginning to learn the nuances of the Xantharian way. Ayla was patient, explaining everything with a serenity that seemed to flow from her very being. He spent his days in her workshop, studying the living crystals that resonated with his touch, learning about the ancient art of soul vessels, and even sitting with Ayla as she taught him about the balance of energy and emotion, the sacred rituals that defined her people. But it was on the sixth day, as he watched Ayla demonstrate the subtle manipulation of crystalline energy, that he noticed the shadows that had started to creep into her eyes. "You've been distant," he said, breaking the silence as he wiped the sweat from his brow. The room was charged with the energy of the crystals, their glow shifting as Ayla's movements sent ripples through the ether. Her normally serene expression was shadowed by something darker. She turned, her violet eyes meeting his. They were beautiful, yes, but now he saw they held a weariness that wasn't there before. "I am fine," she said, but Evan could sense the fissures behind her calm facade. "Ayla, tell me what's wrong," he urged, taking a step closer. The bond between them rippled, a silent echo of his concern brushing against her emotions. He felt her resistance, a subtle block that had grown stronger with each passing day. "The bond, it's telling me you're holding something back." The room seemed to shrink as silence stretched between them, the only sound the subtle hum of the crystals that filled the chamber. Finally, Ayla sighed, the sound tinged with a hint of regret. She let her arms fall, the energy around her fading as her gaze drifted to the floor. "It's not just the bond," she said, her voice soft, carrying a tremor that made Evan's pulse quicken. "There are those who do not accept it. There are those who will do whatever it takes to stop what we have." A chill settled in the pit of his stomach. "Who would try to stop us?" he asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Those who want power," she replied, her eyes flashing with something fierce. "The Zalish. They see the bond as a threat to their control. We are different, Evan. The bond we share is rare and powerful, and it frightens them." Evan felt a surge of anger course through him. He had known Ayla was special, but hearing that someone would go to such lengths to tear them apart made him see red. "We won't let them win. We'll fight." Ayla's gaze met his, a flicker of hope lighting her eyes. "You're already more than I could have hoped for," she whispered. "But we cannot fight them the way you think. The Zaelish are more cunning than brute force. They play games with alliances and subterfuge. We need to be careful, Evan. Then we'll outsmart them," he said, drawing her into his arms. The bond flared between them, the pulse of it strong enough to make his chest ache. He wanted to promise her that no one would ever come between them, but Ayla was right. This wasn't just a fight of strength. It was a battle of wills. Ayla leaned into him, her forehead touching his. "They won't see us coming," she said, a small smile curving her lips. "I know you, Evan Cade. You're a fighter, but you're also a thinker. That's why we're bound. We're stronger together." The next morning, the sun crested over the alien horizon, its light casting an amber hue across the station's metallic walls. Evan was already up, going over the data Ayla had provided, an encrypted file she'd been hiding from him until now. It contained information about the Zaelish, a coalition of powerful leaders who controlled trade routes, rare resources, and even the fate of entire star systems. "Evan," Ayla's voice came from the doorway, soft but with an edge of determination. She was wrapped in her silver bodysuit, her hair pulled back to reveal the angular line of her jaw. "You need to see this." He turned to see her holding an ornate, holographic tablet, the screen flickering to life with an image that made his blood freeze. It was a map, but not one of any star system Evan had seen. It was an ancient map, carved into the crystalline surface of an artifact that glowed with the light of 1,000 stars. "What is this?" he asked, taking a step forward. "A blueprint for power," she said, her voice low. "The Zaelish have a relic called the Aether Key. It's said to be capable of bending the fabric of reality, of controlling the bonds between people, making them more like puppets than partners. The Zaelish want it, and they want us to lead them to it." Evan's heart pounded. He didn't know if he felt more afraid or exhilarated. But as he looked at Ayla, he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't let anything happen to her. "Then we need to find it first," he said, his voice resolute. "If the Zaelish want to control the bond, we'll make sure they never get their hands on it." Ayla nodded, the glint in her eye fierce and defiant. "It's time to change the game, Evan. But first we need allies." The two of them stepped into the bustling corridors of the station, the ambient glow of the crystalline city pulsing with the same energy that surged between them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew this was only the beginning. And if they were going to survive, they'd have to face the unknown together. In the distance, unseen eyes watched. Eyes that belonged to those who would do whatever it took to break the bond and bend the universe to their will. But Ayla and Evan weren't about to let that happen. Not now, not ever. The station was buzzing with life, its labyrinth of corridors and markets alive with the voices of 1,000 different species. The day had started with a hesitant peace, but the tension in the air was palpable. Word of the Zalish's interest in the Aether Key had spread like wildfire, and even the station's most hardened traders whispered rumors in hushed tones. Evan knew it was only a matter of time before they would have to act. Ayla had been true to her word. She reached out to contacts hidden among the far reaches of the station, those who had once considered themselves neutral, but were now wary of what the Zaelish could bring. They needed allies, and if anyone could rally them, it was Ayla. The first meeting was held in the dim glow of a private chamber in the back of the market district. Evan could feel the pulse of the bond humming between him and Ayla as she stood beside him, her eyes flashing with determination. The crystalline structures embedded in the walls seemed to echo her energy, their glow shifting to a warm, reassuring hue. The first to arrive was a lean, half-cybernetic bounty hunter named Tarek, known for his sharp reflexes and even sharper tongue. His mechanical arm clicked with a rhythm of its own as he made his way through the chamber, scanning the room with eyes that never rested. "You really think you can convince the rogue traders and smugglers to take on the Zaelish?" He scoffed, but there was a spark in his eye that belied his skepticism. Ayla met his gaze, unflinching. "We don't have a choice, Tarek. If the Zaelish get their hands on the Aether Key, it's not just our bond they'll control. It's everyone's freedom." Tarek's eyes softened, the metallic sheen flickering as he processed her words. "And what do you expect me to do? Bring the weapons?" His voice dropped to a whisper, but the tension in his posture spoke louder than his words. Evan spoke up, the deep timbre of his voice cutting through the charged silence. "We need more than weapons. We need minds, strategies, and unity. We need to show the station that there's more at stake than just a few petty fights over credits." The next to join was Mira, a mysterious and reclusive data hacker who could slice through any security network like a hot knife through plasma. Her dark, angular features were shadowed by the hood of her cloak, and she moved with the grace of a phantom. "If we're playing this game, I want to know everything about the Aether Key. Its origin, its potential, and its weakness," she said, dropping a data chip onto the table. Ayla's hand reached out, fingers brushing the chip lightly before she nodded. "It's a start," she said. "We'll need every piece of information we can get." Tarek let out a low whistle, leaning back against the wall with arms crossed. "Well, if we're digging into this, I want in. But know this, if the Zalish come for me, I won't go down without a fight." Evan could feel the resolve settling in the room, the spark of hope igniting in those who'd felt powerless for so long. He glanced at Ayla, who met his gaze with a smile so small, it was almost fleeting. But it was enough to make his heart tighten. She believed in him, and for now, that was enough. The hours that followed were a blur of planning and coordination. Mira worked feverishly at her console, bypassing security protocols and tracking down any rumors or sightings of Zalish scouts. Tarek and Evan worked together to gather arms and provisions, negotiating with the more reluctant vendors who had once turned a blind eye to the station's underbelly. Ayla, meanwhile, reached out to the leaders of the rogue traders, those who owed allegiance to no one but their own greed and survival instincts. It was a risky move, but Ayla's presence alone carried weight. Her reputation as a guardian of the rare and powerful, coupled with her striking aura, gave her an edge. It wasn't long before the station became a hive of activity. Small, clandestine groups emerged from the shadows, whispering of rebellion, of freedom from the Zalish's iron grip. Some were cynics who feared change, while others were hopeful souls whose fates had already been sealed by the power-hungry traders. As the moon of Xanther rose, painting the station's domed ceiling with a soft, pale light, the room of the clandestine gathering grew silent. Mira stood with her data chip in hand, eyes locked on Ayla. "I've done it. I've found where they're keeping the Aether Key," she said, voice trembling with both fear and exhilaration. A collective breath caught in the room. Evan felt the weight of what that meant, the first real step toward the unknown. But there was something more, a shadow that flitted across Ayla's face, a flicker of dread she couldn't suppress. "What is it?" Evan asked, moving closer. Ayla took a deep breath, holding his gaze with a tension that made his chest tighten. "It's not just the Zalish guarding it. There's something more, something ancient." "What do you mean?" Tarek's voice was laced with impatience, but even he could sense that they were standing on the precipice of something far greater than they'd realized. Ayla's fingers trembled slightly as she reached out, touching the edge of the data chip. The room seemed to hold its breath as the holographic projection flared to life. The image that emerged was not just of the Aether Key, but of a dark, crystalline figure, frozen in time. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly blue light, and it seemed to hum with an energy so ancient it made Evan's skin prickle. "The Warden of the Aether Key," Ayla whispered. "An ancient guardian that no one has dared to awaken in thousands of years." And if the Zaelish get to it first, it won't just be a war for power. It will be a war for our very souls. The room erupted into a chorus of whispers and anxious glances. But for Evan, there was only one thought that mattered. Ayla had trusted him with her truth, with her people's future, and he knew now that their battle was more than just theirs. It was the fight of a lifetime, and he'd be there with her every step of the way. "Then let's wake up the Warden," Evan said, his voice hard as steel. "And make sure the Zaelish never see the dawn." A tense silence fell, but there was no turning back. Not now. The storm was coming, and this time they were ready to face it, no matter the cost. The station thrummed with an electric pulse that seemed to resonate deep in Evan's bones. The entire complex was abuzz with the whispers of what was to come, the air filled with the tang of imminent confrontation. Every step he took down the narrow, steel corridors of the underbelly felt like a march toward destiny. Ayla was beside him, her eyes ablaze with a mixture of fear and determination, her aura a vivid, stormy sea of emotions that mirrored his own. The plan was set. Mira had decrypted the coordinates of the Aether Key's holding place. It was nestled within the heart of the old mining sector, an ancient area sealed off and forgotten by most who lived on the station. The Zalish, having seen no reason to search there, were blind to its location. But Ayla and Evan knew better. Tarek had rounded up a group of loyal mercenaries, some of whom carried crude, scavenged weaponry, others wielding state-of-the-art plasma rifles. They waited in the shadows, muscle and steel ready to move. The tension was taut, like the string of a bow drawn back and ready to snap. The path to the mining sector was treacherous. The tunnels were dark, a maze of rusted piping and broken machinery. Echoes of dripping water and the distant hum of the station's life continued to reverberate, an unsettling symphony in the silence. The group moved in single file, Ayla and Evan leading, their breath shallow with anticipation. "You're sure this is the right place?" Tarek's voice came through the comms, his tone laced with impatience. Ayla didn't break stride. "It's the only place that matches the coordinates. We're almost there." Evan turned his head slightly, catching Ayla's gaze. A flicker of fear flashed in her eyes, only to be replaced by the steady fire of resolve. The bond between them pulsed in his mind, a warmth that promised more than just survival. It promised victory. But for the first time, he felt that warmth threatened by something deeper and darker than they had anticipated. As they approached the final bend, the walls began to shimmer with a faint, blue light, illuminating the path forward. The group halted, weapons raised, hearts pounding like war drums. Ayla stepped forward and raised her hand, signaling for them to wait. A deep rumble, as if the station itself were protesting their presence, rolled through the tunnels. Before anyone could react, the wall before them shimmered and retracted, revealing a chamber of crystalline splendor. The room was vast, an otherworldly cavern of translucent stones, each pulsating with an inner fire. And at the center, suspended in a lattice of radiant energy, was the Aether Key, a vessel glowing with the light of 1,000 stars, patterns flowing across its surface like liquid stardust. But the sight of it was eclipsed by the figure that appeared at the far end of the chamber. Tall, crystalline, with eyes that burned with an icy blue light, it stood unmoving but powerful. Its voice resonated in the minds of everyone present, a deep, melodic tone that seemed to cut through the air itself. "Who dares disturb the Warden of the Aether Key?" Ayla stepped forward, her voice trembling but fierce. "We are the ones who seek freedom. We are the ones who fight for a future where no one bows to the Zaelish or any other tyrant." The Warden's eyes flickered with recognition, and then with a hint of something ancient, a feeling long forgotten. "Then you know what must be done to claim it. The bond you seek comes at a price." Evan glanced at Ayla, his heart thundering. "We're ready to pay it." The Warden tilted its head, the crystalline ridges along its form shifting in a dance of light. "You must prove yourselves worthy of this power, not with strength alone, but with the purity of your intent." Before anyone could react, a shiver of energy shot through the chamber. The room darkened. The light of the ether, key flaring like the heart of a star. And then, from the depths of the crystalline structures, the Zaelish appeared. Their leader, a tall, cloaked figure with eyes like polished onyx, stepped forward, flanked by his most loyal warriors. "You've come far, but this is where your journey ends," he said, his voice a cold whisper that dripped with malice. Tarek swore, lifting his plasma rifle. The air thickened with tension, the unspoken knowledge that this was the moment where fates would be sealed. Evan's fingers twitched as the bond pulsed with urgency, almost as if it were warning him of what was to come. "You don't have to do this, Ayla," Evan said, the raw emotion in his voice catching them both by surprise. "I'm with you no matter what." Tears shimmered in Ayla's eyes, the corners of her lips tugging into a smile that was both hopeful and heartbreaking. "I know," she whispered, reaching out to touch his face, "and I wouldn't have it any other way." In an instant, the chamber erupted into chaos. Energy blasts sizzled through the air as the two sides clashed, bodies moving like shadows in the flickering light. Mira hacked into the station's defenses, disrupting the Zalish's communications while Tarek's team engaged in a frenzied battle, plasma and steel flashing in the dark. But then, from within the heart of the chamber, the Aether Key pulsed. It resonated with an otherworldly frequency that made the hair on the back of Evan's neck stand on end. The Warden's voice roared, this time echoing with power. "Only those who are pure of purpose can wield this bond." The light enveloped Ayla, radiating from the vessel itself and swirling like a living storm. Evan stepped forward, pushing through the chaos to reach her side. He caught her, just as her body began to glow, the power surging through her. She gasped, eyes wide and glistening with tears as the light surrounded them both. "I choose this," she whispered, and Evan knew she meant more than just the Aether Key. She meant him, them, and everything they could be. The Warden's crystalline form shimmered, and a beam of energy shot toward the Zalish leader, who was thrown back as if struck by a force of nature. The other Zalish soldiers scattered, their dark forms disappearing into the labyrinth of the station. For a moment, silence reigned. Evan felt the warmth in his chest, the connection deepened, and the world around them fell away. Ayla's eyes met his, and in that moment he understood. "We've won," she said, voice strong despite the strain. "But this is just the beginning." The Aether Key, now a shimmering, pulsating beacon, had chosen its champions. The bond between them was complete, a promise of power and unity that would echo across the stars. The war was far from over, but now, with Ayla and Evan standing side by side, they were ready for whatever darkness the universe would throw at them. And as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, they knew one thing for certain. Together, they would forge a new future.